There are moments in history when everything seems impossible, when the size of the enemy is so overwhelming that defeat looks guaranteed even before the first battle begins, and yet, somehow, the weaker side manages to rise, unify, and fight back with a determination that changes the world forever. The Persian Wars are exactly that kind of story. When you think about a massive empire stretching from India to Egypt, controlling millions of people, facing a cluster of small, constantly arguing Greek city-states, you naturally asked, how did those tiny states resist at all? Why did Persia even bother attacking Greece in the first place? What was the real background of this conflict? And how did just a handful of Greek cities manage to defeat one of the most powerful empires the world had ever seen? Were the Greeks simply lucky? Was Persia too large to manage such a campaign? Or did some unexpected decisions, heroic sacrifices, and unbelievable unity turn the tide of history? And finally, what happened after the wars? How did this ancient conflict shape politics, culture, and global thought for centuries? These questions make the Persian Wars one of the most fascinating events in ancient history, and in this video, I am going to discuss all these things. So, without any delay, let's start. The background of the Persian Wars begins long before the first Persian soldier ever stepped into Greek territory. To understand why these conflicts happened, we must look at the world around 550 to 500 BC. Persia, under Cyrus the Great and later Darius I, had built an empire like no other, efficient, organized, wealthy, and stretching across continents. The Greek world, on the other hand, was fragmented into dozens of independent city-states, each with its own politics, culture, and rivalries. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, all powerful in their own regions, but constantly fighting each other. This lack of unity was Persia's greatest advantage, but the spark of war didn't come from mainland Greece itself. It came from the Greek cities living across the Aegean Sea in Asia Minor. Places like Miletus, Ephesus, and many others. These cities were technically Greek, but had been conquered by Persia and placed under Persian governors. When these Ionian Greeks began to grow unhappy with Persian rule and finally rebelled around 499 BCE, they hoped mainland Greece would help. And Athens, impulsive, proud, and newly experimenting with democracy, decided to support them. This decision changed everything. Athens sent ships and soldiers to assist the rebels. They even marched inland and helped burn the Persian regional capital of Sardis. To Athens, it was a bold move. To Persia, it was an insult. Darius I was furious. He reportedly ordered a servant to remind him every day, "Master, remember the Athenians." From that moment onward, he was determined to punish Athens, not just militarily, but symbolically, to show the world what happened to those who defied the empire. The Ionian Revolt eventually failed, but they became the trigger for the first Persian invasion. Persia wanted revenge, and also wanted to pull mainland Greece into its empire the way it controlled Asia Minor. So, around 490 BCE, Darius launched his attack. He didn't send the whole empire, because he believed Greece could be crushed with a relatively small expedition, but he underestimated the Greek spirit of resistance, and even more importantly, their emerging sense of identity. The first major clash came at Marathon, a name that still echoes through history. The Persian forces landed on the plain near Marathon. Confident in their strategy, they had more soldiers, more resources, and the support of local allies. The Athenians, however, did not wait inside their walls. Instead, they marched out to face Persia in open battle. With clever tactics, the Greeks performed a double envelopment maneuver, stretching their lines thin but strong on the wings, allowing the Persians to push into the center and then crushing them from both sides. It was a shocking victory. A city that Persia thought would collapse instantly had stood firm and defeated a superpower. But this was only the beginning. Darius wanted revenge, but before he could launch a larger invasion, he died. His son Xerxes then inherited not just the throne, but also his father's mission to conquer Greece. Xerxes prepared for years. He assembled one of the largest armies the ancient world had ever seen. Some ancient sources exaggerate the numbers into the millions, but even realistic estimates speak of tens of thousands of elite soldiers. Engineers built bridges across the Hellespont so the Persian army could walk from Asia to Europe. Supply lines were organized, fleets were prepared, and Xerxes believed nothing could stop this wave of conquests this time. Greece realized that individual city-states would not survive alone. Something extraordinary began to happen. Rivals set aside their hatred. Athens and Sparta, the two greatest enemies of the Greek world, formed a rare alliance. The Spartans offered their unmatched discipline and military experience, while Athens brought its powerful navy and strategic vision. Other cities joined too, creating what historians now call the Hellenic League. It was not perfect unity. There were still arguments, fears, and mistrusts, but there was enough to face the Persian storm. When Xerxes' forces entered Greece in 480 BCE, they overwhelmed the north easily. Cities surrendered, some out of fear, others out of political convenience. But the Greeks made their stand at the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a place where numbers mattered. Less because only a few men could fight side by side at a time. And here, under Spartan King Leonidas, the Greeks, especially the famous 300 Spartans, resisted the Persian advance with astonishing bravery. Their stand is remembered not because they won, but because they held for days against overwhelming odds, buying precious time for the rest of Greece to prepare. Eventually, betrayal revealed a secret path around Thermopylae, and Leonidas was surrounded. Instead of retreating, he stayed and fought to the death with his remaining men. Thermopylae became a symbol, a reminder that courage can delay even the strongest empire. But delaying was not enough. After Thermopylae, the Persians advanced south, burning cities and even capturing Athens, whose population had already fled to nearby islands. It seemed Persia had finally succeeded. Yet, strategically, Greece was far from defeated. Athens still had its most powerful weapon, its navy, intact, and it was the navy that would decide the next phase of the war. This brings us to the waters of Salamis, where the fate of the conflict would soon be determined. And so, while Xerxes was celebrating the capture of Athens, the real heart of Greek resistance was gathering in the narrow waters near the island of Salamis. Themistocles, the Athenian strategist, understood something that Xerxes did not. The Persian navy was large and powerful, but in cramped, narrow straits, size becomes a weakness, not a strength. Themistocles played a psychological game. He sent a secret message to Xerxes pretending that the Greeks were scared and planning to escape. Xerxes believed this misinformation and rushed his massive fleet into the straits, hoping to trap them once and for all. But instead of a fleeing enemy, he found a compact, disciplined Greek navy waiting exactly where Themistocles wanted them. Suddenly, cramped between rocky shorelines and unable to maneuver, the Persian ships lost their advantage. Their numbers worked against them. Their formations collapsed. Greek triremes, smaller but faster, rammed into the Persian ships again and again. The battle turned chaotic, and the Persians could not adapt. When the dust settled, the Persian navy had suffered a devastating defeat. For the first time, Xerxes realized that conquering Greece might not be as easy as he had imagined. This victory at Salamis changed everything. Xerxes, fearing that further losses would trap his army deep inside Greece, took a large portion of his forces back to Asia, leaving behind a powerful military contingent under his general Mardonius to continue the campaign on land. Persia still believed it could crush Greek resistance with one decisive battle, but now the Greeks had momentum. For the first time in their history, Greek city-states that had viewed each other with suspicion began to trust one another. The war had forced them to recognize something deeper. Despite their differences, they shared a culture, a language, and a destiny worth fighting for. This sense of unity was not a political alliance on paper, it was an emotional awakening. The final major land battle came at Plataea in 479 BCE. Here, the combined Greek forces, led by the Spartans, faced the remaining Persian army. Plataea was not a simple clash. It was messy, filled with shifting positions, misunderstandings, and logistical struggles. But what ultimately decided the battle was discipline. The Greeks fought with steady formation, while the Persian infantry, although brave, lacked the heavy armor and close-quarter fighting experience of the Greek hoplites. When the Greeks finally charged, their bronze shields locked, their spears steady, they broke the Persian line. Mardonius was killed, and with him, Persia's last hope for victory. At almost the same time, the Greek navy won another decisive victory at Mycale on the coast of Asia Minor, ensuring that Persia would no longer threaten Greece directly. This marked the true end of the Persian Wars. Now, let's talk about the result of these wars and why they unfolded the way they did. The Greeks didn't just win battles, they defeated the world's largest empire. How was this possible? First, unity played a massive role. Greece almost never stood united for anything. But in the face of extinction, they came together. Sparta and Athens, usually bitter rivals, pooled their strengths, Spartan infantry and Athenian naval power. Without both, the victory would have been impossible. Second, the geography of Greece helped. Narrow passes like Thermopylae, island-filled waters like Salamis, and rugged terrain prevented the Persians from fully utilizing their numerical superiority. Persia was an empire built for open plains, not tight mountain roads. Third, Greek military training and tactics gave them an advantage. The hoplite phalanx, a dense formation of armored infantry, was incredibly effective against slightly armored Persian troops. Greek triremes were also more maneuverable than Persian ships, especially in narrow waters. Fourth, the Persians were conducting warfare far from home. Maintaining supply lines for tens of thousands of soldiers and sailors across seas and mountains was extremely difficult. The farther an empire stretches, the more fragile its campaigns become. But perhaps the most important reason was psychological. The Greeks were fighting for their homeland. The Persians were fighting for imperial expansion. One side had everything to lose, the other very little. And in war, motivation often matters more than numbers on a scroll. But could the result have been different? Absolutely. If the Greeks had not united, Persia would have easily conquered them. If the Persians had avoided the trap at Salamis and used their navy more cautiously, they might have crushed the Greek fleet piece by piece. If Persia had captured and held Athens earlier, before the Greek navy evacuated, morale could have collapsed. If Thessaly and other Greek regions had resisted instead of surrendering, Persia would have faced more resistance earlier and adjusted strategies. Even one different decision, such as Leonidas retreating instead of dying at Thermopylae, might have changed the psychological narrative enough to break Greek unity later on. The Persian Wars were not a guaranteed Greek victory. They were a series of fragile moments, heroic risks, and narrow escapes. Now let's discuss the political and global impact of these wars. The Persian Wars did far more than protect Greece. They shaped the entire future of Western civilization. After defeating Persia, Athens rose to incredible heights. Their confidence soared. Their democracy grew stronger. Their economy flourished through maritime dominance. This new cultural energy sparked the golden age of Athens, the age of Socrates, Pericles, Sophocles, Herodotus, and the birth of Western philosophy, drama, architecture, and political thought. Without the Persian Wars, the Parthenon would not exist, Athenian democracy might never have matured, and many of the ideas that influence global politics today could have disappeared before they were born. At the same time, the wars created deep tensions within Greece. Athens' rise alarmed Sparta, eventually leading to the Peloponnesian War, a destructive conflict that tore Greece apart. In a strange twist, the unity that saved Greece during the Persian Wars disappeared as soon as the common enemy was gone. Globally, the Persian Wars also changed the East-West balance. Persia survived, of course, but the aura of invincibility around it faded. Its expansion slowed. Its psychological dominance weakened. Other regions saw that resisting Persia was possible. Culturally, the wars gave rise to a narrative of freedom versus tyranny. Whether or not this was fully accurate, Greek writers portrayed themselves as defenders of liberty against autocratic Persia. This idea influenced generations of thinkers, especially during the Enlightenment, shaping how people saw democracy and empire. In short, the Persian Wars marked a moment when a small group of divided city-states saved their identity, pushed back an imperial giant, and altered the cultural trajectory of the world. And with that, we reach the conclusion of this long journey through one of history's most dramatic conflicts. A war born from revolt, fueled by pride, shaped by strategy, and remembered for heroism. A war where geography, unity, and belief mattered just as much as weapons. And a war whose consequences still echo through every discussion about democracy, freedom, and resistance today. Before we end, I want to ask you one thing. Do you think Persia could have actually conquered Greece if a few decisions had gone differently? Or were the Greeks destined to win this war no matter what? Comment your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.